from Capital One. Excuse me. We're going to learn about their experience using DeepRacer.
Hey, thank you, Cameron. Hello everyone, thanks for coming to our Chalk Talk this evening. I am Sujoy and I'm joined with my colleague from Capital One, Martin. We are here to talk more about how Capital One trains internal associates on reinforcement learning using the AWS DeepRacer. So you might be wondering a little bit like what's the connection between a finance company and DeepRacer. Hopefully by end of this talk it will become a little more clearer. So let me quickly go over the agenda. So we'll be talking a little bit about Capital One, as I mentioned, and we'll be talking about how we are doing the reinforcement learning to teach the internal associates. So yeah, here it is, how we are using the reinforcement learning to help multiple teams compete and to teach within the company. And also larger emphasis would be about the AWS DeepRacer community in New York City that we are currently running. Besides that, these are some of the breakout sessions that our colleagues at Capital One are running. So if you want to know like how technology is being used currently within Capital One, and then if you have more questions, you can join us at the booth 830 and talk more about machine learning and grab some cool swags. About Capital One, as you probably know, it's one of the largest banks in the country. We focus on credit cards, banking solutions, auto loans. But besides that, there is another important factor. We also, as a software company, we focus on the talent that we have, and we focus on the technology that we are using, including open source technologies, machine learning, and most importantly, most of it is on public cloud, that is the AWS. So as you see over here, we have some of the popular credit cards, and all of the analysis for those credit cards in some way or the other use machine learning, and this helps making better decision for us down the line. So another important thing is the one on the right side that you see. It's the Capital One Cafe. So these are a new initiative where you can actually go use it as a co-working space, grab a coffee, talk about technology, or if you want to get some information about finance. And one of the more important things is me and Martin are actually planning to use, hopefully, we'll be able to host more DeepRacer sessions in one of those cafes. So we are from New York, so we have two there, and then we'll probably want to use one of them definitely. We'll talk about the internal DeepRacer competition. So before that, I wanted to establish the link. So as you all are aware of DeepRacer by now, but the more important factor about the DeepRacer is the underlying technologies that are lying inside, that is making that model happen to finish the racetrack. So some of the things that the DeepRacer itself does is it has the AWS SageMaker, it has the RoboMaker, it has Kinesis, and they are all connected using the Docker, VPC, S3. So these are all some of the important technologies that we are using to solve the problems within Capital One also. Like when we want to expose our associates to machine learning, instead of telling them what machine learning's ABC are, it's much more nicer and much more easier if you were about to give them a more practical and an easy example to start with, and also understand which technologies are to be used how. Because especially when you talk about SageMaker and all the other technologies, we are looking at model building, training, and deploying, which is really important to solve any business problem. I'm sure like in any organization, if you have a machine learning model that you're currently using to solve a particular solution, you want that model to be seen in production. So these are like some of the tools which are really important and helps us understand how we can use machine learning in production. So this graph is about our experience with the DeepRacer itself. So Capital One understood that using DeepRacer as an example, it's actually helpful to educate the associates. So they started an internal DeepRacer tournament with over 300 plus associates, and we had like a good session, and we had internal meetups, and there was like a 4-week tournament starting with free credits on AWS to get us familiar with all this technology and start using them. So this graph is actually like how me and Martin had actually started our journey. As you see on week first, our lap time, like the average time to finish one lap in the racetrack, was quite high. We had no clue what we were doing. We were just starting. We were digging into more material. We were trying to find out what's going wrong, what is something which we can improve. But it took us quite a while. Like if you see towards the week 4, that's where our average lap time started improving, and it reduced dramatically. And now this is what actually helped us understand, like we do have some bottlenecks, and we want to help people who are actually having this obstruction, that they want to learn quickly and they want to perform better with the DeepRacer, but they don't have enough resources. And so we started with this idea, the DeepRacer community in New York City. And probably Martin is going to talk a little bit more about the models that we created during this journey and how we participated in the New York Summit.
Thank you, Sujoy. So, as part of the internal competition, we've noticed that most of the teams have the same graph. Like they start off in week 0 with a very high average lap time, and as they get more experience to DeepRacer, their lap time decreases significantly. So we thought, how can we help our associates accelerate their learning process quickly? So one of the ways we did that was, during week 2 of our internal competition, this clip is from YouTube, from the AWS DeepRacer TV New York episode on the right. So we had an internal track, and we had office hours and stuff like that. And that's Sujoy, who was not in the YouTube video, but he's out there moving the controls on the iPad. So as part of appearing on the AWS DeepRacer TV, a lot of teams reached out to us and they asked us blatantly, like, can you give us your reward functions? Can you tell us your action spaces? And we were like, okay, we can't give you all our information, but we can help you in this journey. So we sat down with most of the teams and we asked them, how are you training your models? And we observed a lot of patterns and anti-patterns. And we'll go through some of the anti-patterns today. And see how you guys can benefit from speeding up your learning process with DeepRacer. So one of the most common anti-pattern we found was writing non-confusing reward functions. Or actually, we should write non-confusing reward functions. Now you guys probably know about reward functions. It's a simple Python function that you guys either reward the car for doing something or penalize the car for doing something bad. So let's go into what is a confusing reward function, right? So we notice that most of the people, they go to Amazon, AWS's documentation for DeepRacer, where they find 2 reward functions like this. So let's take a look at the reward functions, right? The first reward function is to follow the track center. So this is from AWS documentation. The second one is stay inside 2 track borders. So what most people do is they just copy and paste the reward functions and put it in as their reward function and run the model. Now, the problem is, if you read carefully through this code, you'll see that this one gives a reward of 1 if it's very close to the center line of the track, right? And as you move away from the track, you get fewer rewards. In the second reward function, as long as you stay within the two track borders, it'll give you a reward of 1. So people were like, okay, let's use both of them and maybe our car will run super fast across the track. But that is not what happened during evaluation. What happened during evaluation was the car still tried to stay as close to the center line as possible, because that reward overrides the one of the track border. So that's why you should try to keep your reward functions as short as possible. And once you know exactly what your reward functions are, try to write non-confusing reward functions. That's what we call it. The second thing is, most of you have heard from other talks that there's a log analysis notebook built by the community on Slack. So we ended up writing a lot of custom code in the Jupyter notebook, like basically plotting the car across multiple iterations on the track. And we thought, how could we do this better? How could we speed up the whole process? So what we did was we developed a Lambda function for faster feedback cycles. So the input is your RoboMaker job ID, and the output is just a bunch of plots, graphs in S3 bucket. So this is helpful because you just you don't have to watch the Kinesis streams to see how your car is doing. But once the job is finished, you just pick up the RoboMaker job ID, put it in your Lambda function environment variable, and hit test, and then you get the plots and graphs in your S3 bucket, and then you can analyze them later. Now, we cannot share the source code with you, but I think it will give you a fair idea of how to do it on your own, especially if you can just bundle up matplotlib, pandas, and all those other Python libraries and get them under 50 megabytes. You can develop your own Lambda function that does exactly what we're talking about. Cool. Yeah. So one of the other ways we empower our associates is by keeping them up to date with what's the latest out there in machine learning, right? So I'm a certified machine learning instructor at Capital One, and as part of a standard machine learning training course, we cover topics across supervised learning, unsupervised learning, and reinforcement learning. When we go through supervised learning and unsupervised learning, people get it because you have a lot of examples within Capital One or even in the public out there. But reinforcement learning, it was a tricky subject because we don't have many examples within Capital One, and the only example that we kind of used was AlphaGo. And I don't know how many folks over here have played the game of Go, but I haven't. So first you teach the audience how to play the game of Go. Then you teach them how the computer would play a game of Go. So that was a bit tricky. I'm not tricky, but the people just couldn't understand that concept, I think. And they just let the slides go by, and we had no feedback from the audience. So I decided to tweak the course a little bit and introduce DeepRacer as part of reinforcement learning. And then it clicked in people's brains that, oh, there's an agent, and then there's an environment. And that's how they figured out RL concepts, reinforcement learning concepts. And then not only they grasp the concepts quickly, but they can also translate that to real life applications within Capital One quickly as well. So some of the questions we get when we show the track and all that stuff is, well, you don't need to make a right turn out there, but what if you penalize the car for making a right turn? So in a short 30-minute span, people are able to get reinforcement learning concepts very quickly, and they're also able to apply them to the day-to-day job. So they're definitely one of the best uses of DeepRacer as an educational tool within Capital One. And then Sujoy and I were motivated to start a community along with Lyndon's help and the community's help over here. So we have this meetup website. So far we've had 3 meetups in New York City. These are some pictures from our second meetup where Amazon was kind enough to give us a couple of DeepRacers and an oval track. So we basically had a competition. And for our third meetup, we had it at the Loft where we built a track using masking tape and green sheets of paper and blue tablecloths like the ones shown here. So yeah, we had 3 meetups so far, and we are always excited to have people who are in New York City come join our meetups so that we can have more community engagement. So that's it from us. Do you have any questions? Sure. I don't know this one or not.
It's down there.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Could you share any use case for reinforcement learning from Capital One that is not confidential?
Yeah, that's a good question, but we cannot go into too much details about like the exact examples, but we can tell you that yes, there is some effort into like gleaning the reinforcement learning concepts into some of the applications, but we cannot reveal the secret sauce, if you will.
Thanks, guys. Quick question. So you're kind of teaching people how to do reinforcement learning when you kind of go through that with the DeepRacer, right? And you said people kind of pick up the concept fairly easy because they have like some sort of like understanding of how it works and so on and so forth, and they just like the light bulb clicks on and they go do it in their own. So do you guys get involved in what they do? Do they come back to you and say, hey, look, I got the reinforcement learning part of this. I want to apply it to this, but it's not quite working. Do they come back to you, or do they kind of start with you and just kind of go off in their own silos?
So usually most of the people who attended my machine learning training course, they also attend the meetup so that they can actually test their models and stuff like that. So we have a huge Capital One engagement in the meetups as well. So there's 3 avenues that we think that Capital One is using to train its internal associates as well as the New York City community.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. He has a mic.
One of the questions that came in from the community was how to join meetups. Did we just cover that? I didn't.
No, sure. So you can join the Slack community. So there's a community, deepracing.io, and you go to US Meetup NYC, and you can go through that, or you can go to the Meetup website also, as well. Oh, there.
Okay. One of the questions from the community was if you were to, like, knowing what you know now, if you were to redo this from the very beginning, what would you do different?
Sure. So as you know, real estate is prime in New York City, right? It's expensive. So when we have our meetups, we usually book them in Capital One offices or AWS Loft. We want to have we have to have more collaboration with AWS Loft so that we can have bigger tracks, and also we can have more cars and races and competitions.
Okay. Thank you. Any more questions for Martin and Sujoy?
So when you say that you contacted AWS for the track and all, how do you actually go about it? Like, can you explain, like, whom do you contact, or how does that work?
So like Cameron, there was a evangelist in New York City who is into machine learning. He does computer vision, he does DeepRacer and stuff like that. So he was a helpful resource. And we also found a solutions architect through our account manager who helped us give us the cars, actually. So I went and picked up the cars, picked up the track, and we did all the meetups together. But having a loft in your city also helps a lot because it's prime real estate in the heart of the city. So space is important in New York City, and we're trying to still, for 2018 track we were able to wing it, but 2019 track looks much bigger, and for the third meetup we had to scale it down to 1/3 the size, so just so that we could fit it in the parameters of the biggest room we could find.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just about the tracks, are they portable, or how did you make them? We just saw somebody else making tracks before. So what was your technique of making them?
You want to take it, or you want? Okay. So we used multiple techniques, right? We had the vinyl track that we showed on the YouTube video that Capital One had. Not this one, but the one from the YouTube video. Then we used some tracks like this, which were basically different strips of paper that we taped together. You can see the tape right here. And then the third method is we just did the old-fashioned way, which is have white masking tape. So I have a lot of rolls of them. So people who swing by my office, they're like, why do you need white masking tapes and lots of green paper and blue tablecloths? So, but we want to get more professional with it. I know the previous presenters, they taught us how to build a track. So we'll use some of the learnings from the previous presenter and try to build a track ourselves that can be detached and attached whenever we need it.
Thank you. Any more questions? All right, thank you very much. Let's give it for Martin and Sujoy.